Vice President Kamala Harris is in Poland meeting with the Poland President and the Ukrainian refugees in Warsaw. Harris condemning the Russian attack on the Children's Hospital in Mariupol, calling for an international investigation, though. She stopped short of accusing Russia of war crimes. And then this happened.
A friend in need is a friend indeed.
Okay, so this time.
Another awkward moment there, and the signature laugh from our vice president as the world watches Ukraine under attack. 2 million people have fled that country in the last 2 weeks. Let's check in now with Newsmax correspondent Alex Salvi. He joins us. We're still waiting for Alex. He'll join us shortly, but he's been covering the vice president's trip there in Poland. The vice president also saying today that the United States' commitment to Article 5 of the NATO Charter, which says that an attack on one NATO country is an attack on all countries, is ironclad. And the whole point of having the NATO Charter and the treaty is that so you don't have to say those things out loud. But let's get to Alex Salvi now. He joins us live from Warsaw with the latest. Hey, Alex.
Yeah, I know better than to keep you waiting too long, John. But NATO, as you were saying, wants to portray a united front in the face of Russian aggression. But this trip was quickly overshadowed by what seemed to be a fractured approach, with Poland pushing to send fighter jets to Ukraine as the U.S. backed off that idea and feared that it would amount to an escalation. Now, the vice president was asked about where the U.S. stands on that issue as of right now.
I want to be very clear. The United States and Poland are united in what we have done and are prepared to do to help Ukraine and the people of Ukraine. Full stop.
So not a very direct answer, and the Polish president also danced around that subject, saying that he didn't want to expose NATO to any difficult situations. But Vice President Harris confirming that the U.S. has delivered 2 Patriot missile systems to Poland, in addition to 4,700 troops to secure that eastern flank. Now, as far as any progress coming out of this trip, Politico reporting that administration officials say that Harris isn't here to make any deals, humanitarian or militarily, but instead to act as an emblem of the U.S. commitment to Poland and the NATO alliance. John, Bianca?
An emblem in Europe. Kamala Harris. Thanks so much, Alex. We appreciate your report. All right, now Russia has made several veiled threats to commercial airlines, or at least one key veiled threat here, as more countries discuss bolstering Ukraine's air defenses. This is a tweet from Russia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. This woman's kind of like the Jen Psaki of Russia. Here's what she says. We call on EU and NATO countries to stop the thoughtless flooding of the unviable Kiev regime with the latest weapons systems in order to avoid enormous risk to international civilian aviation and other means of transport in Europe and beyond. Let's talk about all this now and welcome in the former U.S. ambassador to NATO and former special representative for Ukraine, Kurt Volker. Ambassador, great to have you back with us.
Thank you. Great to be here.
I wanted to first ask you about that very thinly veiled threat from Russia. You know, we had this situation not too long ago where so-called Russian-backed separatists shot down a Malaysian jetliner. Is this in reference to that at all? I mean, everything we hear from Moscow now is an escalation, whatever it may be. But what was your take on this particular tweet?
Right. So you're absolutely right. The last thing you said, everything we hear from Moscow is about threatened escalation in one way or another, whether it's nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, civilian aircraft. There's one reason that they are doing this. That is to try to dissuade the West from doing what we can to help Ukraine. They want to instill fear in us so they can continue pummeling these Ukrainian cities. We should not respond or take counsel of our fears. We should be determining what we can do to help Ukraine.
Is it your estimation here that, you know, instituting a no-fly zone or providing these planes to Ukraine, would that trigger a nuclear response or no from Vladimir Putin? Is that really the thought here for those advocating for a no-fly zone, that Vladimir Putin would not use his nuclear weapons or would not fire some of his more sophisticated weapons directly into the capital of Kiev?
Right. So, look, we have to take the threat of nuclear weapons seriously, meaning that we need to communicate to Russia. If you touch a nuclear weapon, we are entering the war and we will take you out. But we don't.
It might be too late by that point.
Yeah, it is not our intention to do that. They should be concerned about what we would do, and they should be concerned about any nuclear use. And I am sure Russia's military and generals and civilian population would be. So we just need to say, don't touch nuclear weapons. And what we would do if we did a no-fly zone or other things, help the Ukrainians fight to defend their own country. We don't want to enter the war. We want the Ukrainians to have a chance to defend and protect themselves. And what we could do is also do everything possible to help protect civilians and help them get to safety.
We also wanted to ask you about Joe Biden's role in all this. He is the commander-in-chief, but we just saw the vice president in Warsaw today. And, you look back on this Foreign Policy magazine article that was written in 2016 that asks, what will Ukraine do without Uncle Joe? Vice President Joe Biden led the administration's support of Ukraine, but Kiev worries whether the next White House, the Trump White House, will have its back as Putin looks to ramp up. Now, we've seen Putin ramp up, of course, but we didn't see an invasion of Ukraine under President Trump. Where is Joe Biden on all this? I mean, shouldn't he be leading this effort? Shouldn't he be the one in Warsaw?
Right. So on the one hand, we have to respect the concerns that people have about getting the U.S. dragged into a direct war with Russia and that possibly leading to nuclear use. Those are real issues, and we have to be careful about these. But that being said, we also have to realize that we are a bigger, stronger, capable power. Russia is not doing well in the war, is concerned about bringing us into the war. And so we need to be shaping our plans and our approach to how we are going to help Ukraine survive this onslaught from Russia, not simply stepping back and waiting or seeing how Russia does and then reacting to that.
And shouldn't that be the role of the president, really kind of taking the lead here and not the vice president? Or we also saw this ham-handed attempt by Tony Blinken over the weekend to talk about the situation with the jets in Poland. Yeah,
well,
where's the president?
I feel for Secretary Blinken. I feel for Secretary Blinken because he's trying to move this along. He came out on Sunday and said, yes, we have a green light. They can do this. And then he's overruled. It seems as though we need better coordination and more American leadership in this effort. And let me add, too, our allies want to help. Our allies, like Poland, are ready, but they're not going to stick their neck out if the U.S. is not with them.
No, they won't. Why should they? Ambassador Kurt Volker, great to see you. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.